Sorry about that loud chirp. Uncle Ron is stuff. Second one of the day. I knew. I was thinking about it for some time. I wanted to talk about failures. Uh, I've had failures, and I don't know. I remember them, every single one of them. Uh, Things that I did, and they were successful. There's a couple big ones that I do remember and real proud of. But the failures never go away. Um, and I don't know. We don't. Nobody talks about their failures. I mean, why would you want to do that? Well, I think I'm trying to say that you maybe you remember them all. I don't know. I do. I don't know. Maybe I'm asking you a question. Do you remember your failures? Um, the first one I remember was I got caught in a lie. I think I was in the second grade, third grade, and I lied about something at school, and it came to light, and disappointment. It was a failure in terms of my dad. I had failed him. I had, uh, left a lasting stain on me. I did learn after that not to lie, so it had a good outcome, but that was a failure. Another failure was I was liked electricity and electronics, and I was a kid, 10, 11, 12 years old. I'm building stuff and wiring things up, and we had moved from where we had lived for a really long time to a new place, and there was an old couple up the street, and they had this AM radio with tubes, and I had done some TV repair, taking the tubes out and taking the Rochester and checking them, and buying a replacement, getting TV work again. It wasn't rocket science or anything, but anyway, this old couple asked me, the radio would come on and play for a while and then stop. So he said, "Can you fix it?" And I said, "I don't know." I probably said, "Yeah," but anyway, um, couldn't I couldn't eliminate the symptom, and I searched around here and did that, and I adjusted things I shouldn't have, and kept messing with it and messing with it and messing with it, till finally I had broken the string that was wrapped around the tuning knob that moved this little marker across the dial to tell you what frequency you were set at. Well, that was like a spring-loaded string, and total and utter failure. And I'm pretty sure that I said to folks, "I'm sorry, I couldn't get it," and I remember it. It was somebody trusted me, and I don't know. They may have just said, "Here, take this and play with it," but I think they really wanted me to fix it, and I didn't. And so I got a band on my head here. I was talking to this woman one time, and she had done nude photography, and she was saying that you for nude photography, if you're gonna, you start off nude, because otherwise you have lines like this, like where your panties go across and your bra and stuff like that. You start off nude, and then you add clothes if you are going to go that direction in the photo shoot. That was interesting. I didn't know that, and it's like, I'm sure you don't know that and you don't care about that, but anyway, um, a failure to communicate. So the radio was a disaster. It's often interesting to me anyway, because a failure like that I don't ever forget. And over the years I've learned more and more and more and more. So I know now, if I could only be back there in time, I know that it's the capacitors that's bad. And I'm not sure I would even know how to find it now, but I know what's wrong with it. It wasn't one of the tubes. I already tested all those. It was a capacitor, but I didn't know that then. And I messed around with it so much. And one of the things I did learn out of that was, if you can't get it, you better back off and go easy on it, because if you keep going, you're going to mess it up. My father, he had a failure. He had a German cuckoo clock that his brother had brought back from Germany when he was stationed there after World War II, occupation forces in Germany. I had another uncle that actually was also in Germany and post World War II as an occupation force. But anyway, my uncle brought back these cuckoo clocks, Bavarian cuckoo clocks for all the family members. My grandfather got a really special big one, and then his brothers got these smaller but nice versions. Anyway, things stopped working. The cuckoo wouldn't come out in cuckoo, so my father took it apart and messed with it and messed with it and messed with it, and then just had to throw up his hands. So that was a failure he had. And I learned from that too that some things like that, or going into a iPad or an whatever, it's really sensitive and dangerous. And I had a failure there too, where I was trying to replace a screen on an iPhone that I had, and I didn't disconnect the battery before I started exchanging the screen, and I wound up blowing a diode out on the board. And I had to send it away and get that one little stinking teeny diode replaced. There was no way I had a soldering iron that could take it out. I had to. It was like I don't know, $20 to unsolder this diode and put it back in again. But it was a failure. I learned my lesson. I'm really not happy and don't normally go into any of Apple products. I have successfully done some bigger Apple products where found something and changed it and it worked again. But by and large, they're like appliances, and they're not really meant to be repaired in that sense. It's really touchy. So there was another failure. Work environment, I was like a hired gun. I worked for various companies, and they would get some job in, and I was one of the few computer people they had. They were mainly radio frequency, RF antennas and transmitters and jammers and all that kind of stuff. But I was a computer guy, and computers were just beginning to creep into everything, especially in the military. So they would send me out if they needed a computer guy to do something. And oftentimes the marketing people had procured this effort. And usually, if they were trying to crack into a new agency or government department or something, they would get some little small job, and we'll see how it goes. Here's a contract for $30,000 or something, and we just want this done, and I would be sent there. And a lot of those were successful. Some I'm real prideful of. They were hard work, and I got it. But there was one that me and the marketing guy went out to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and there was a major, and he like had a PhD. The Air Force had a lot of really bright people, we probably still do. But he had a concept. The problem was the communications between the various armed forces was terrible at the time. It was difficult for ground troops to call airstrikes, or different. The Marines had different radios. The Marine aircraft had different radios than the Air Force had, and troops on the ground had different radios than. And talking up and down and communicating was a hard thing. And he had a concept which was we need sort of a universal radio that has modules to it, and that we could configure some sort of standard frame, if you will, and put in these modules, and it would allow the same radio to interoperate between all of the services. And all he was looking for was he wanted to advance this idea up his chain of command to get funding for it. That's really what it was about. He had a great idea, and he knew the need was there, and so he tasked us with, he had explained what his concept was, and he tasked us with to writing a proposal for him that he would be able to put upstream. Well, I think we were supposed to do it in 24 hours. We were there in a hotel and got back from meeting with him, and I started writing right away. And this was not, there was no word processors then, no computer, had to do it by hand. And I had a couple of legal pads, and I started and fumbled around, and I couldn't grasp, but I couldn't get even a good start going. And all night, I mean, literally, I stayed awake all night trying to do this thing, trying to get a handle on putting his concept into some sort of definable written form. Obviously, he had trouble, or he would have done it himself. But I failed. I couldn't. Next morning, the guy, the marketing guy, he really hadn't tried. It wasn't his job anyway. I mean, he was there, but it was me who was supposed to do this because I was supposed to be computers. And went back and said, look, I just can't get it. It's interesting. Years later, now you could take what's called a software-defined radio approach and make it at least receive. Transmit's still a little tough, but you could make it received all kind of different other channels and other branches of the service. Fail. I had another project like that where the marketing guy said, okay, here's another starter for this particular division, and we got a couple grand, we need a paper put together, and he wanted, it had to do with missiles and launching of missiles and friendly fire. That's what it was about, Air Force again. And I took the specs off the missile and all that kind of stuff, and I built a computer program and ran it 1,000,000,000 times and calculated, how far people had to stay away and all that. And I was happy with it. I thought what they wanted, So when we submitted it, I wasn't there, and the guy came back and said, that's totally wrong. They hated it. They knew that. What they were looking for, which I didn't know, was they wanted policies and practices for the pilots and also the other branches of the military to know how to avoid friendly fire. Well, I didn't know that was what the goal was. Fail. Lots of failures. Failed repairing printers. I mean, I've repaired probably 100 printers, but I failed at least once. I ruined the print head on it. Failures. Failure. Failures in relationships. I had difficulty with my mom. I had have had difficulty with my brother. We're 4 years apart. I'm the oldest. And he and I speak like different languages. I don't know how to convey it, but we just have trouble getting along. And that's a failure in my eyes because I have all this experience and I credit myself with these skill sets and so on. And, I've worked with a lot of different people, and I should be able to figure out a way that we can communicate and exchange, pleasantries. But it doesn't work. I've tried and tried and tried, and it's a failure, and that's a big one. I hate the idea that I cannot come up with some mechanism that works with him. I had a lady work for me once that we were doing consulting work for various large telecommunications companies like AT&T, that kind of thing, Verizon. We were doing things like for them, looking at various aspects of the market. How big is cell phones going to be in 20 years? What's the market for cell phones in the government? And this was before there were cell phones. So we had gotten a large, $100,000 contract to research this stuff, and it took a lot of. We had data, and we cranked data, and we came up with stuff, and delivered it, and then they said, well, yeah, but I said, well, but that's not in the scope of work, I mean, that's not what we signed up to do. And so they immediately said, but she said you could do it underneath of this. And yeah, she did. She didn't have to do it. She was more like eye candy than anything else. She was not particularly proficient at doing that kind of research. But she had told him. And I got really angry. I already put a lot of work into it. We had spent $100,000 already, in payrolls, and I think we might have had to buy some databases to research. So on. So I got really angry with her, and it's the first time I really got angry with a coworker. And again, it was a failure on my part because I couldn't somehow, turn it around and talk to her in some reasonable fashion and explain to her that, you can't just willy-nilly expand the scope of work. But it was a failure on my part. And in every case, the failure is me. I'm not blaming failures on other people. I don't do that. I mean, I said the marketing guy wasn't clear about, what they wanted and whatever. Well, there's nothing I could do about that. And he was not super tech guy, I mean, he was a marketing guy. He was out glad-handing people, trying to get them to give us some money to see if we could help them in any way and then grow it from there. And that did happen in a couple cases where I was the first guy in, did a good job. That led to larger contracts and more people and more people. And so, but nonetheless, we had failures in that domain, in the work domain. One time, when I was consulting, I decided I would get into artificial intelligence and see if I could craft an expert system in the domain of federal government contract, analyzing proposals and making a determination whether you should bid or not, and try to capture the knowledge I had accumulated on that subject into an artificial intelligence program that like an assistant for people who were examining proposals from the government to determine whether they should expend time and effort to respond to the proposal. They had a chance of winning or not. Anyway, this was a whole new software domain for me I failed to understand the mechanism that was really involved, and so I tried to shoehorn this programming into the programs I was familiar with, and it doesn't work like that. So, I didn't even realize I'd failed for some time. I had a working thing, but it was worthless. I mean, it just, and I spent a lot of my own money buying this stuff and spent months plowing, trying to get it to do what I wanted it to do and thought it would do. And I never grasped fully how you use that language to implement this. Now, since then, yeah, I clued in and finally understood it. And that's an interesting aspect about when you do things. You might not know everything required to do something at the time, but for me, it sticks in there, and it's like maybe I'm trying to figure it out long term, and so I'm constantly looking like, well, what else did I need to know? It's interesting about books and things you read that you may not fully grasp what the person is saying in the book or the scenario that he has written around and the imagery you're seeing in your mind, and you're just not ready. You don't have enough life experiences to fully understand what he is trying to impart to you. Like the implicit meaning or something. Serious literature can have undertones of all kinds of stuff, but you just don't have enough yet to fully grasp it. And it's like years later, you're sitting around and go, "Bang! I know what he was trying to tell me." That's kind of interesting. It's not a failure in a sense to understand at the time. It's just you don't fully grasp it. And all the failures I've ever had, I sort of look at them that way. Failures. I've done stuff I took a VW engine out of a Volkswagen bus I had once, and I tore it all apart, put it all back together, and it ran for like 60 days and blew up. You know, I didn't really know what I was doing, and didn't do a thorough enough job. If I were to do it today, it would be entirely different. I expect I'd have a much better result, but it was a failure nonetheless. And when I do things, I do a lot of things with the real world, mechanical things and electrical things and plumbing and heating and air conditioning. I have failures. I didn't fully understand something or another, or the instructions and the directions are limited, or I can't find anything in the way of real research that even anybody that seemed like they've ever done it before, and I do searches for that, and I fail, and fails as long as they're not fatal errors. And what's a fatal error? Well, you get injured or you die, or like a printer, ruining the print head because the print head costs more than a whole new printer now. That's a failure. That was a fatal error that I did. I thought I was doing the right thing, but it was a fatal error. I took private polish training for a while, and the potential for fatal errors there is large. So you really got to be on top of your game all the time, and walking and chewing gum and balancing, juggling balls at the same time, and it's like 14 of those things going at the same time, and so there's possibility of failures. But uh, relationship failures are the worst, of course, and I'm sure you've experienced those. And you mull over them, maybe you don't. I don't know. I try to learn something, no matter what I do. If I fail, I just do it again, and if I fail, I just do it again, and I keep doing it until I get it right. And I'm in a position. I try not to spend money again, but nonetheless, if I have to, I do. And my take on that is a lot of things that I repair and fix. What I found is that the tech people you can hire, yes, they're better initially than I am. They've been trained, and they went to school and whatever. But after the first time, and that's my first time when I'm learning something, yeah, I can make mistakes and fail and not understand. But by the second time I've done something, I'm as good as the tech, and the third time I'm better than the tech because I really care about the results. If I do a brake job on my car, I really want to know that I've done it right. If you take it into a shop, you believe they've done it right, but you don't know. I took a car in for an oil change one time. They were free because I bought this car, and they overfilled it. They put too much oil in. Well, I shouldn't. I don't do that. I mean, I'd check it when I'm done. I actually underfill and then you start it up and see what's going on, and then if I have to add more, I do. But they didn't do that. So, it's like, that's why I try to repair everything myself, because I just don't have a high confidence that these people, they don't care. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is people you hire, if you're lucky, you get a good one, and they do care. But other people, they don't. They come, they see you, they do whatever it is. You never see them again. So what? They might have fixed it, and they may not have. I had a lot of bad experiences with techs like that they didn't really know what they were doing, or what they knew was not enough to fix the problem that I had, and I eventually had to sort it out myself and fix it. But nonetheless, failures. Failures is something you're going to run into from other people. You ask them to do something or other, and they fail. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with a failure where it's somebody else? And well, there was one of the things, raising kids. Unfortunately, I often would say, well, I'd just rather do it by myself than have to try to involve them, because they'll mess it up and it'll be just more work for me. And that was the wrong attitude to take. I should have really involved them more. And yes, it would have taken more time and they would have failed and we would have corrected it. I do encourage you to have your children participate in all sorts of activities so they do experience, oops, I made a mistake, and now we'll deal with it. It's not fatal, not a fatal mistake, and move along. Anyway, failures. I don't know how you deal with them. I don't, they don't accumulate on me and depress me down and say, well, you've made so many. There's a Grateful Dead song about if I had $1 for every ace I had drawn, I could buy the town of Abilene. Well, I can substitute the word, if I had $1 for every mistake I had made, I could buy the town of New York City. I mean, I made plenty of them. Mistakes and failures, they're sort of different. I mean, I don't know if you think about it that way, but I make mistakes, but they're not really failures in that sense. Failures, I got a lot of them. I tend to remember them all. Again, I don't remember what I did right. It's like I just do it and move on. I do keep something I learned out of it, but the failures, I also keep something that I learned out of it. Like I said, with Apple products, I'm really leery about going in there, and I really want to know what I'm doing before I try to do it, because it's really touchy. But anyway, this is on failures, and I don't know if anybody cares again, but maybe I'm documenting it for myself, as I said earlier. Failure. My dad got bald, and he tried all kind of things to grow hair, and he failed, and he failed. He rubbed tonics, and he had vibrators, and all. It was a fail, but yeah, I don't know. I don't dwell on other people's failures. It's really bad when politicians fail, because you and I pay for it, and they don't. No consequences. Failures have to have consequences. And I think your kids do need to fail now and then and suffer the consequences of them. How else do you learn? Anyway, that's enough of this one. I don't know what episode, but I'll post it.